All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get the event started. Um, I guess aloha mai kako in Hawaii, that means hello or greeting or welcome to everybody. I want to thank you guys for attending this event today, titled The Book Talk and Signing with Diana Ma for one of her publications today, titled The Unbeatable Lily Hong. Before we kick off this event, I think it's extremely important for us to give our mahalos to all the hands and bodies it took to really put this event together. So just to start off, AANAPISI, if y'all are not too familiar with it, it's a federally funded program that is here at North Seattle College that really helps to support our Asian Pacific Islander student population, as well as the larger North Seattle Community College. Some of the great things that we get to do with this grant is we get to throw on events very similar to this, as well as the event that's taking place tomorrow, Wednesday, February 7th, from 12 to 2 o'clock. Here in the Grove, it's the Lunar New Year celebration. So if you guys are free, we'll love to have you guys there. We'll have taiko drum performers, K-pop dance club performing, as well as free food. In addition, want to give a huge shout out and mahalo to Wing Luke Museum. If you guys haven't gotten a chance to check out their table, please stop on by, talk stories with them. They have really great resources and things to pass along to you guys, such as brochures. If you guys do stop by, in the red shirt we have M, and then in the black we have Vivian. Okay. If you're looking at the Wing Luke Museum on the left-hand side, we have books for you guys to purchase, and Sion can help you guys with that purchase. Lastly, I want to give a huge shout out to Karen Maida Allman for moderating today's event, of course, as well as Diana Ma. And then also Zola, the North Seattle College's librarian, for introducing, or is going to be introducing our speakers. And then a huge, huge shout out to Epic, Jim and Minjin for all the IT, audio, everything. I mean, I could only imagine. I see all these cords running all over, and it's a little overwhelming for me. So I'm not too sure how they do it. Anyways, huge mahalo to everyone. And I saved them for last because they did a kick-ass job in the decoration pieces. So it is all of our students. Specifically, we have our peer mentor, Ian, who's located in the blue, Wen, who's located in the purple. And in addition to that, we also have Shante and Najia and the other student leadership students and international students for really doing all these great decorations for both this event and tomorrow's event. I guess without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Zola.
Thank you, Jordan. I'm Zola Mumford. I'm one of the reference and instruction librarians here at North. Thank you so much for joining us here today in the Grove. If this is your first visit to North Seattle College, the Grove is where students make things happen, and the community makes things happen. This event is being live streamed and recorded. In case someone really wanted to be here today, they missed it, please share that info with them later. We'll send that round to the campus. There are light refreshments available. Please help yourselves. And I am honored to introduce Diana Ma and Karen Maeda Allman. Karen Maeda Allman is a literary advocate, agent, bookseller, and arts board member, and she's part of what makes Seattle such a wonderful literary town. Diana Ma, who many of you know, is a Chinese-American author who writes young adult, YA, and middle grade, MG, books that feature kick-ass Asian American heroes. Growing up as a Chinese-American girl, these were the kind of characters she hungered to find in books. She believes that it's important for all kids to recognize themselves as the heroes of the books they read. Her belief that diverse books help us create a better world is what drives her writing. She has 2 wonderful kids of her own and wants them to grow up with books that represent them. Diana was a 2019 We Need Diverse Books mentee with Swati Avashti and a 2021 Highlights Foundation Muslim Storytellers Fellow. Her debut novel, which the library has, Eris apparently was a 2021 Washington State Book Award finalist in the Young Adult Literature category. She has a BA in Creative Writing from the University of Washington and an MA in English with a creative writing focus from the University of Illinois Chicago and she is represented by Krista Heskey and Danielle Hunter of Macintosh and Otis. Diana lives in a suburb of Seattle and teaches composition, creative writing, literature, and humanities at a little college in Seattle.
So, thanks everybody for attending today, whether you're streaming it or watching on a recording, especially if you come to North Seattle today. Thank you so much to everyone who helped put on this program. And I wanted to also say that literature happens in a context, and actually Zola, Diana, and I are part of the same literary context that goes back to maybe the 90s in Seattle. And Zola, as a filmmaker, she's also a writer. Her parents were writers and historians and also publishers in town. And then Diana herself with 3 books now, 1 more on the way. And I was actually a bookseller. And the 3 of us all at various times were at a place called Red and Black Bookstore Collective, which was a feminist, not-for-profit on Capitol Hill. And it was one of the first spaces where I noticed many books by marginalized people, people of color, GLBTQ people, also political books. And one of the things that we were known for that has kind of been lost to history a little bit is that we were a center for children's literature by and about people of color. And so I think we first met at around that time, probably in the 90s. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I've been thinking about it a lot, actually. So I was a freshman at the University of Washington sometime in the early 90s. And I remember growing up without books about Asian Americans, certainly without children's books. And I didn't know that it was possible for me to write a children's book by an Asian American author, because who would want to read about a girl like Lily? I just didn't think there was an audience for that. So then I remember walking in to Red and Black Bookstore, and I was like, oh, there's a book by a BIPOC author, and there's a book, and there's another book. And then meeting Karen, who, she didn't say this, but we were both, can I say this?
Oh, please do.
Okay. We're both fans of Xena Warrior Princess, and we bonded strongly over that, in addition to our love of books. And so Red and Black Books and Karen were an introduction to the possibility of the books I could create. And that was so important, because without a community of authors who are writing the books I needed, I wouldn't have realized that I could myself write a book that will hopefully be a book that someone out there needs.
And I think around that time is the first time that I saw some of the first young adult books by Asian American writers. One of the writers is Lawrence Yep, who has a book called Dragon Wings. He has many, many books. He has a book that's been produced by Netflix, so his work is still very much in the public eye. Another writer would be Marie Young-Ok Lee, who had a book called Finding My Voice. And Marie is a dynamo writing teacher and just had a major book come out in the last year for adults. But I will always remember her for that first book. And that also was re-released last year, so pretty exciting. Wow. And the field actually of young adult writing as such is kind of newish. It's around 1967, probably a lot of people have heard of The Outsiders, and so that was one of the first big sellers that created kind of more of a market. And then, then around 2000, we saw another kind of bump. The books, The Hunger Games, Twilight started coming out, and there was more crossover, adults reading this young adult literature. And then it was in 2001 when the American Library Association had its first awards for Asian Pacific American children's books. So young adult, middle reader, and also picture books. It was just one award. now it's 3 awards. So we've come a long way. Can you tell me a little bit about what, for some people may not realize what a middle reader book is here, can you talk a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I also realized that I wanted to say thank you to all the people who Jordan thanked, and also thank you to Jordan, who has been amazing in putting this on. So Jordan, Zola, and I came together to plan for this event, and and Jordan has done so much work, so I just really, really want to thank him. And I also want to thank Zola, who, when we were first talking about this, said, why don't we make this a community event? So, and I love that idea. So that is why our community is here. We are a community college. My book is strongly about community, so it felt very appropriate. So middle grade books are, one of the reasons I love writing middle grade books is because I once heard it described as, when I was first getting into middle grade books and trying to decide how to go about it, because I was coming to middle grade books from young adult, I heard that middle grade books have a greater proportion of hope. And I thought that was just a lovely way to describe middle grade books. And they have oftentimes themes of friends, family, and community. So that felt very appropriate for this event. The other thing about middle grade books is they are written for children about 8 through 12. And that is an age full of connection to community and family and friends. And it's also a time when you're not as, I think, self-conscious about what the world can tell you you can and cannot do. So I had the most fun writing Lily Hong, a character who is unbeatable, who is willing to do whatever it takes for her friends, family, and community.
How did you come up with the name Lily Hong for that character?
Oh, I didn't. This is a very boring story.
Okay.
Well, I will say my editor, the amazing Angela Song, first came up with the title extracurricular. And apparently it's as I got into it, and then she was like, actually, extracurricular is the title of, I'm going to get this wrong, but I think it's a K-drama. It's got some horror in it. Does anyone know the extracurricular? Anyway, so nothing wrong with that, but very different from my book. So they wanted, when someone put in the search extracurricular, they wanted my book to come up and not the K-drama. So they said, we have to come up with a different title. And the editorial team got together and they said, what about the unbeatable Lily Hong? And I thought about it, and the more I thought about it, and I think I told some friends about this, I was like, what do you think of the title, The Unbeatable Lily Hong? And the more I thought about it, the more I realized it really does describe my character. It describes Lily, so it's kind of a boring story. I didn't come up with it.
I think it's kind of interesting because I was a bookseller for over 30 years. I know that especially now, people's attention spans can be kind of short. And so a lot about a book, the title, the character, the first page, even the first line make a big difference. And I think this one just really kind of flies off the shelf a bit.
Oh, and the cover.
Yeah,
So
very nice.
Rebecca Chan did the artwork, and I love her art so much. And then in the back, there's almost a little trailer for the book because she has Lily's to-do list, and it's things like write Greek mythology report, yay, 10 pages, and it's crossed off as like done. And there's a few things like, save community center, still left to do. So that's her to-do list.
Yeah, that's so great. So how did you get the idea for the book?
So like Lily, I also attended Chinese school. And I also did Chinese dance as an extracurricular activity in Chinese school. And like many of the kids who are portrayed in the book, I resented going to Chinese school. It was 4 hours on a Saturday, every Saturday, plus homework, which I was always rushing to do the night before. By the way, there's a scene in the book about pennies where the kids have to pay a penny for every mistake they made. I did not make that up. That was actually very much my experience, and I carried a bag of pennies to school on Saturday morning because I always made a ton of mistakes. So I hated Chinese school, and I resented it. And when I talked to my friends and classmates about it in what I called normal school, which is an awful way of putting it, my friends were mostly white, and they would say, yeah, that's terrible. I can't believe you have to do that. That's cruel. And I developed this idea of Chinese school as something I had to go to, something that was done to me, this horrific thing, when actually it was a positive experience. I actually enjoyed Chinese school, but in my head it was something that I hated. And I wondered if there was a different story, if I had grown up reading about Chinese school as this place of adventure where fun things happen, then I might have had a different attitude toward Chinese school. My cousin, who also went to Chinese school, emailed me and said, I read The Unbeatable Lily Hong. It was great. I loved it. I really enjoyed how you portrayed the different friendships in Chinese school and in the other school. And he said, but I could tell it was fiction because the kids were trying to save the school. So he had grown up with that same image of Chinese school as this negative place, although I know he enjoyed Chinese school.
It sounded like a lot of fun to me, and I was kind of like slightly envious reading. I was like, wow, Chinese school, and there's language, and so I think you that comes across really well. And also, I'd never heard of Chinese school when I was growing up. In a neighborhood that was, there were not very many Asian Americans. And so what about your background that's maybe a little similar and also a little different from your Lily Hong character?
There's a lot I drew from, but there's a lot that is very different as well. And then back to Chinese school, I did want to say there are a lot of Chinese schools now. And even when I was growing up, though, there wasn't a Chinese school in Renton where I was growing up, so I went to Chinese school, I think first in Federal Way and then in Bellevue. But when I was, over the weekend, I was at the Wing Luk Museum for their Lunar New Year celebration, and I was sitting at a table and talking to families that came through, and one woman came by and she was talking to me and she said, so you wrote a book, what's your book about? And I said, well, it's about kids trying to save their Chinese school. And her eyes lit up and she said, we just came from Chinese school and my kids hate it. And I was like, well, they might not if, they read this book. And she's like, oh, I'm going to buy it. So she ran off to the bookstore and came back and she's like, please sign this for my kid. And she brought her poor kid with her. I actually went down to the store because it was the end of my shift. So I went to the store to find them. And so I was signing it in line as they were buying the book. And I signed it to the kid, and the kid was like, oh, I'm going to show all my friends that she signed this. And I was like, okay, maybe one down. One kid who might find Chinese school to be positive. So one of the things, my friend over there is laughing at me, I think, because I said this at another reading. Lily is very, very unapologetically competitive, right? She's just like, why shouldn't I try to be the best? Why shouldn't I be all or nothing? Why shouldn't I be able to do this? And oh, I can't believe he got that reading short books, won the Pizza Prize reading short books. So she's like very fiercely ambitious and competitive. I am very quietly competitive, where unless people know me, I don't think they see that competitive side of me. Like all the things that Lily says out loud, I sometimes think. So it was really great. But then, all this gender and race stuff of, oh, a good Chinese girl can't say that. I need to be modest. I can't be seen as too ambitious, or people will think I'm a dragon lady. So it's walking that balance that Lily doesn't have to do, was very freeing. She's just like, I am going to win that pizza party. So I'm going to save the community center. I am going to break into this gated community and find out what is behind there. So not that I'm advocating for, trespassing, but I loved writing about her.
One of the things that I so appreciated about this book, as well as your others, is the ways that you teach us about your characters, the way that you help us get to know them, and also details about their ethnicity, about their experiences, and also about religion. And I think that there's a little opening for that now that really wasn't earlier on. There's room for more kinds of stories right now.
Right. I think there is room. I also think that it takes editors who are open to hearing those stories. It takes authors who have community to write those stories. So one of the things I want to say about Lily Hong is that when I first wrote this book, Lily was not Muslim like I am. But as I was writing this book, I was also, Zola read the introduction about how I have a fellowship with the Muslim storytellers. So it was a 2-year fellowship sponsored by the Doris Duke Foundation. I want to make sure, since we're on camera, I want to get that in there. Yay, Doris Duke. And put on by the Highlights Foundation, and who do amazing, wonderful work. And it was this 2 years of creating this space for, I can't remember how many of us, 17 of us, 17 Muslim storytellers who write children's books. Some of us just starting out, some of us slightly in the field, but all of us needing community. And they brought us together twice a year in their beautiful campus in Pennsylvania. And we talked about what it was like to be Muslim in the publishing industry. What anti-Muslim sentiment, what racism were we experiencing, how to support each other, how to find value in each other's stories. And I had never had anything like that before. And I remember writing in the application that the book I got representation on, the book where I got my agent, was about a Chinese Muslim Hui character, and it hasn't sold. In the meantime, I had been publishing books about Chinese American characters who are not Muslim, and those have sold. And it told me what books editors wanted. And that has an impact on you, right? If you're writing books that aren't selling, and then books that leave out one part of your identity are selling, what books are you going to write? So, but my community was just, it is like, this is my family now. We formed relationships that are so deep that even though the fellowship has ended, we're still in touch with each other. We do readings together, we communicate, we have Zoom calls, we still do peer workshopping. It's an incredible community. And before that community, what I wrote here I think would have been aspirational. I didn't have a template. So I'm getting back to the book. In the book, Lily has to learn how to do the fan dance in order to put on a talent show, because for some reason she thinks that's going to, it's a time-honored tradition. Your community center is in trouble. What do? Put on a talent show, right? So that is what she does, and she's learning the fan dance. And oftentimes Chinese dance are based on mythology and legend. So I realized that she has to create her own dance, and it needs to be based on some kind of myth. And when I was thinking about what myth is the most appropriate for this dance, I realized there's a story that has had so much importance in my life. It's called The Phoenix and Her City. And that story is about a phoenix who turns her own body into the fortifications of the city to save it because she loves it so much. And it's a Hui story. So it's a story of my people. And I wanted that to be the story that she turns into a dance. But then I realized, well, then Lily has to be Hui, like I am. Otherwise, it would get into, problematic appropriation. So I didn't want that. So I emailed my editor and said, hey, small change. How do you feel about Lily being Hui Chinese Muslim? And Angela's response was perfect. Because she's Chinese, she talked to her mother. Right? That's perfect. And she's like, oh, I've never heard of the Hui. So she talked to her mother, learned all about the Hui people, and she might have emailed me before she talked to her mother. I'm not quite sure the order of events, but basically her answer was, yes, absolutely, and will you pitch us another book where the main character is Hui, and that's what the book is about? Because in this book, it's just barely mentioned, is about a girl who is Chinese Muslim. And I was like, oh, that sounds great. I have no ideas, but that was a lovely request. And then about a month later, I was like, I have an idea. So I pitched it, and that book is called The Rainbow Fair, and it's coming out 2025 in winter. So, yeah.
So if you're wondering how these books happen, I mean, what a great illustration. What a wonderful illustration. And I have to say, the way that you introduced the characters, Lily's ethnicity in the book, it was really seamless. It was just like a matter of fact, you just kind of like, oh, okay. And then you kind of, it totally makes sense, this folk tale also. So in a few minutes we're going to go to questions, but I always like to raise that now so you can be thinking about what you'd like to ask. But we'll talk a little bit more. One of the other kind of fun streams, fun little threads in this story is all of the many communities that are served in this community center. And of course, one of the communities is there's a Star Trek club. So that kind of resonates back with a Xena fan Star Trek club kind of thing. And I thought this was really interesting because in a way, it's a way where you can bring a book like this where you have maybe parents and children reading it together. So you have a way where people can resonate to that beautiful folktale, and you can have some people kind of smile a little bit about the characters in the Star Trek Club. And just like the ethnic depictions of the Wei character, you have certain things about the Star Trek Club that feel very organic. It's not just thrown in there. It's not just a throwaway. It's just very carefully constructed. Were you thinking, did the Star Trek reference just kind of kind of fly into your mind, or did you have a particular kind of thing that you were trying to do with that sort of reference?
I don't have a specific origin story for the Star Trek Club. It just sounded like so much fun. And I feel like that is a dedicated fandom. So it's actually, I love Star Trek, but it's actually not a fandom that I'm really a part of. Like, I don't go to the Star Trek conventions, and I don't know Klingon, but I love the Star Trek fandom, though, because they are committed, right? And I felt like that was the kind of club that I wanted to bring into the community center. I wanted to show the community center as this is a place where you are going to be supported in whatever your passion is. You're not going to be seen as an outsider or too geeky or too anything. So, so when I created a community center full of these different kinds of clubs, I really wanted a Star Trek club to be in there. And I wanted one character to be someone no one knew who he was because he never broke character. So that was a must for me, is that someone who was like so dedicated to his passion that he had to have an interpreter with them because he only spoke in Klingon. So one of the funny things is that I oftentimes get a request to look at a pronunciation guide. So for the audiobook, there is an audiobook, and so I was sent the pronunciation guide, and I'm used to having pronunciation guides for Chinese words, names, things like that. But then there was a list of Klingon words that they wanted me to provide a pronunciation guide on, and I was like, I had to write my editor an email I never thought I'd send, which just said, I don't speak Klingon.
Though
so
people do.
People do.
Yeah.
And I was like, but here are some links. So that was all I could do.
It's also nicely done, because I think Star Trek was one of the earlier series, and it's enduring now, of course, to do interracial casting.
Yes.
And so I think that's kind of part of the value system of that world. And so I was excited to see that. I also wanted to ask you a little bit about your work. You had the fellowship, the mentorship. You were a mentee of We Need Diverse Books. Can you talk a little bit about that process and that movement?
Oh, that was incredible. So that was in 2019, and that came at a time when I had written my dystopian book. No one is reading dystopian, by the way. I keep being told that. And with a Muslim Chinese main character, and I had written it and rewritten it. I have to say the first draft is terrible, as were the second, third, fourth, and fifth. By the sixth draft, I started to get the hang of it. So so I was querying. I had gotten, for those of you who might not know, the way that traditional book publishing works is that publishers don't read your work without an agent to represent you. So the first step is to get an agent, and that means writing a query letter, sending sample pages, sending the full draft if they request it, and getting rejection after rejection after rejection. So I racked up, I think, well over 100 rejections, and kept revising, kept going, and then I got close a couple times, but I just didn't know what I was doing wrong, or I had an MFA, but I did not go to graduate school in how to write a novel, and I hadn't taken classes. I just know that this was the story that needed to get out. So so then I have been following We Need Diverse Books because it's such an organization. It's an organization that is so meaningful to me in terms of diverse literature. Diverse representation has been my passion for years, even before I started writing again. And so I saw that they had a yearly mentorship where they pair a new unpublished author with a marginalized identity with someone who is published in the field. So I knew it was a long shot because they get so many applications, but it sounded like exactly what I needed. So I was stunned when I received the mentorship. And Swathi not only read my manuscript and gave me such insightful feedback about it, but she also said the thing I needed to hear, which is your voice matters. This is important. Your story is important. And that was what I needed to know more than anything else. So with her mentorship, I went back to querying my novel, and almost immediately I got 6 offers of representation. It was incredible. So, so yeah, I mean, without that mentorship, I wouldn't be here now.
And you've also turned some of what you've learned, I think, through that mentorship into the ways that you work with creative writing students, and also writing groups and writing mentorships. Really important, and I hope you can enlighten us a little bit about why this is important.
Oh, I don't teach the same way at all. So, so I definitely think that the way I teach writing, the way I have been taught to teach writing, has been very structured, and is not as much based on relationships. So the way I teach writing now, the way I read other people's writing is very author-centered, whoever that author is. So students who are authors, I find that the focus is on what they want to know about their own writing, and what they need. So it is instead of me as an authority saying, I'm going to teach you everything I know, and I'm going to give you feedback on this place of authority and knowledge. Instead, I view it as collaboration. We are in a relationship together about your work that has so much value to the world. How can I help you? How can I support you in getting the story you want out in the world? So that's so important to me in my teaching.
What do you think writers need from their writing partners?
That is such a great question. Thank you for asking that. I used to think that what I needed in my writing partners was a critical eye. So I used to say things like, don't be gentle. I can handle it. Just give it, just tell it to me. And now I realize that is how we're taught to be in writing groups. But in what relationship do you ever say, all I want is critique? I only want you to tell me what I am doing wrong. I would never want a relationship that was based only on that. And yet, we think that's acceptable for a very important relationship, which is a writing feedback partners. And if you think about it, you're entrusting someone with your story, which means you're entrusting someone with yourself and your heart. Why would you say, tell me everything that's wrong with it and nothing but what is wrong with it? So I think what we need from our writing feedback partners is an understanding that this is a relationship, an important relationship. It's a very intimate one. And all the care that we put into our most intimate relationships should go into our writing relationship.
That's great advice. And if anybody listening today would like more on this topic, you should definitely check out Diana's website. It's really wonderful. It's dianama.com. Right?
It's dianama.com was taken, so it's actually dianamaauthor.com.
Okay. Yeah. So what are you reading these days? What do you love?
So I am reading, I think I might have to stop reading it. And it's actually really good. It's just, so what I'm reading right now is R.F. Kuang's Babel. It's so good. It's so good. But it's an intense book. And I'm reading it, I mean, fantasy is my love. I love fantasy books. And I am reading it, and the world building is so beautifully done in this book. And it is a book about, and the way she is in this fantasy world telling a story about the devastation of colonialism is incredible. And it's just such a good book. I also read Yellowface, which was for me a very quick read, and then Babel, which is a very slow read. The same author, completely different books. But I'm finding myself really weighed down by this book, and which is probably not a stellar endorsement, but really you should read it. I think I need to take a break from it though and read something a little fluffier.
So I know writers are often asked this question, but who are some of the writers who influenced you, or what are some of the books that you remember really connecting with? One of the things that's really interesting as people, before you answer that question, many writers are asked that, and often they'll say, you know, this famous book, that famous book, but then a little further in the conversation, it'll be a children's book that really they latched onto, that really helped them connect to reading and to writing. So with that in mind.
So as I said, when I was a child, when I was Lily's age, reading books, there weren't a whole lot of books about Asian American characters, and even fewer children's books. And I would say that the books I read back then were Madeline L'Engle, I'm not pronouncing her name correctly, Susan Cooper, The Dark is Rising. That was another middle grade book. So I skewed heavily fantasy. Patricia McKillop is another author. So a lot of fantasy. But the books I read now, I think, I don't read as much middle grade as I probably should to be a middle grade author. But I do, but I'm thinking of fantasy books. Elizabeth Lim, I love Elizabeth Lim, Spinning the Dawn, again, fantasy. So, and actually, I think that even though this is a contemporary novel, I feel that in Lily's love of fantasy, and and I should mention the fandom that Lily loves is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So there's a lot of Buffy references, so I feel like my love of fantasy does come out in this book. But there is something about the ways in which children's books shape us. I was listening to an interview with Jason Reynolds where he was asked, so do you write, Maurice Sendak says that he doesn't think about whether he writes children's books or books for adults, right? He just writes books and then someone shelved them as children's books. And I love Jason Reynolds' response, and he says it better, obviously, than I can capture it, but he said, with due respect to Maurice Sendak, author of Where the Wild Things Are, I feel that I deliberately write for children. Because if you think about it, Toni Morrison started out by reading children's books. So all great writers start out by being influenced by children's books. And there's a special space that I think is so important that you're writing the books that are going to be children's first loves. I mean, my first loves were children's books. I didn't start out by reading adult books, right? I didn't start out by reading Maxine Hong Kingston. I started out by reading A Wrinkle in Time and The Dark is Rising and Harpist in the Wind and Lloyd Alexander and all those kinds of books. Yeah.
So would you say that you're...
Are we time?
Okay. So this is probably a good time to go to questions then. If you have a question, raise your hand, shout it out, and then I will repeat it into, or it looks like, we've got mics in the audience. So any questions for Diana? Questions about this book, questions about writing? Okay.
Oh, there's a question over here.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, here it comes.
There you go.
Yep.
Where do you find the time or the place to be most inspired? I know as a writer myself, it's always hard to find the moment to be creative. So I was wondering what that is for you.
Did you hear my nervous giggle? So I don't have a lot of time in the day. So I'm actually not sure when the time is that I find myself to be most inspired. Because if I wait around for the time to be most inspired, I would do what I did for about 15 years, which is not right. So so I think, so for right now, I came to this event after completing my daily word count goal. So I'm on a deadline to complete a book by April. And I calculated how many words I would have to write. It's a 70,000 word book. I think I could just say what it is. It's I'm writing a Power Rangers young adult book. And I have to complete the first draft by April. And I calculated that it was going to take me 1,000 words a day to finish that. So so I know I have to complete 1,000 words a day. And I knew that today was going to be very packed. So this morning I got up, got onto my computer, wrote my 1,000 words, and then came here. So I was not feeling the most inspired, and I'm not always feeling the most inspired at 11 p.m. when I realize I haven't done my 1,000 words yet and go to the computer and write. But I just feel that I just have to write. And when I'm not under deadline, the thing that inspires me is not the time of the day or the moment, but the story itself.
And I have to add here, you're a teacher. Mm-hmm. You're also a mother of 2 young sons. And so you've got a lot going on.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Other questions?
I'd love to hear about the reaction you've had from kids who are getting to see themselves or see a more diverse world in your books.
I
Talk
love
about
that
a little
question. Yeah, thank you. So my eldest is 14, and I don't know if you have any experience with 14-year-olds, but he's way too cool for his mother right now. So, but when I think he was 12 when Eris apparently came out, and I should have written this down because I don't know why I didn't write it down. But I remember the day it came out. He came out, and he said, just out of the blue, he said, "Mom, I am so proud of you." And it was just like, I was like, oh. And then he read Eris apparently he had an advance copy, so he read it in like 3 days. And then he came out and he said, "Mom, your book is such an empowering romance." And I was like, what 12-year-old says that? And it was just like, it meant more to me than any other review. It was like an empowering romance. I love that. So I have lots of things for his reaction for when he was younger for my first book. Now that I'm on my third book, he said nothing about The Unbeatable Lily Hong. He hasn't even finished it. But my youngest is my youngest doesn't have a long attention span. He's been reading a lot of he just turned 10. He reads a lot of graphic novels, which I find totally valid. You know, graphic novels are novels too. But so he didn't read The Unbeatable. He got through 6 chapters and then he was like, "Mom, can you read it to me?" Which was amazing. So I got to read The Unbeatable Lily Hong to him and see his reaction in real time, which was lovely. He keeps interrupting me to say, "Oh, if you had said I couldn't go to Comic-Con, oh," and I was like, "Well, what would you have done? Would you have like tried to sneak out to Comic-Con like Lily does?" And he was like, "No." And I was like, "Well, what would you have done?" He was like, "I would have gone like this. I can't do this justice, but I'll try." Imagine really, really big eyes and long lashes, and he just like gave me that look, and I was like, "And I would have let you go." So it's been fun.
Can you tell us a little bit about Eris Apparently? Just a little. So, because this book, I love this book, so I want to get you excited about reading this book as well.
Eris Apparently was fun. Eris Apparently is my young adult book. It's my debut novel, and I love following Hollywood stuff. And I don't love the racism, obviously, or sexism, but when I wrote Eris Apparently, my main character is a young teen, 18-year-old Chinese-American actress, and she's confronting an environment where there is a lot of very confusing racism and sexism in the characters that she's supposed to play and how she's supposed to play the character. So it was born out of a desire to write a character who's dealing with all of that, and also an ode to my favorite actors, Asian American actors. So I don't know if I'm doing it justice. It's been a while since I've talked about Eris Apparently. I'm out of practice.
Yeah, I think it's great, and it's also a woman learning to trust her own instincts in that time period. And then there's a follow-up that's her mother's story, her mother and auntie's story. So really wonderful books as well. Other questions? Oh, we got another one in the back. Thanks.
Hi, I'm curious, in your new approach to relating to students and with that world opening up, how has it affected the language of your history?
Oh, you always ask the best questions. Yeah. That's really interesting. I'm thinking through all the layers of this, and it's such a great question because I'm having this revelation as I'm trying to answer it, and so I'm writing in a language that is not my first language. So, or at least it's not the first language that I had fluency in. And I oftentimes don't think of myself as an ELL, so English language learner, but my first language, the language that had intimacy was Chinese, was Mandarin. That was the language that my family spoke to me in. And I learned English they spoke enough English. We had neighbors, so I was learning English too. But English, for me, was the site of school. And I always thought of my English when I first started school as imperfect, not good enough. And there were a lot of school structures that were set up to drive that home. So it was in the 70s, a long time ago, and there were students from Korea, Vietnam. So there were a lot of Asian students, and they were segregated into an ELL program that was the different recesses, different classrooms, and yeah, and we were all harassed, and there were racist comments on the recess, like "Go back to China." And I remember I said once, "I'm half China, half America." And the bullies laughed and laughed and laughed, and I didn't understand why. And they were laughing at my language, that I couldn't say it right. And it wasn't even the meaning I was trying to get at. And it took me a long time to realize there was nothing broken in me. It wasn't my language that was broken. It was the system. So I'm now thinking about the pie paragraph, and make the point, illustrate it, explain it, tie it back in, and don't know quite how to bring it back in, except to say that seems profoundly related in some way. So thank you for that question.
We've got time for 2 more questions.
Okay. Okay, 2 more questions from the audience. Okay.
Do you have any advice for authors that are looking to navigate into finding an agent and being represented or having that type of support?
Absolutely. I think community and support is so vital. I mean, I couldn't have gotten into this without support. So there's a lot of great programs. So if you're writing children's books, We Need Diverse Books has mentorships, as does the Highlights Foundation. So mostly I know about mentorships and community for children book writers. But the Highlights Foundation, I know it's kind of startling, because when I first saw this fellowship for the Muslim storytellers and saw that it was sponsored by the Highlights Foundation, all I could think of was those magazines in the dentist office. So I didn't realize that they did all this incredible equity work, but they do. And I think also finding other authors, especially if you belong to a marginalized community, finding communities who share that identity and just providing that support with each other is so important. Oftentimes I get together with other authors and we don't even look at each other's writing. We just ask, what's going on for you? How's it going? Yeah, checking in and having someone tell you periodically, or a lot, your stories are valuable, your stories are important, keep writing. Please keep writing.
Okay, we've got time for 1 more question. Or we can close on this really inspiring note. Anything you'd like to add?
I just want to thank you for for your time and also your perseverance over many, many years of writing to find representation, to find community, and also helping build community. It's not easy, and I really want to acknowledge that, and also to say what a gift you are to our community. And also writers, thank you for your perseverance and also your gift to the community. What you do is really important. You never know who you're going to be inspiring 25 years later because of something you said a long time ago. And so keep reading, keep writing, and any last words from Diana?
Well, along that note, I will say that you were an inspiration to me, Karen, when I met you all those years ago in, it's like early 1990s, maybe even 1990. Just to see someone who was so passionate about literature. I mean, I describe you as a literary arts advocate, and that's who you are, but being an advocate of literature, being an advocate of stories and of representation is being an advocate of people and communities. So my 18-year-old little brain was like, whoa, books, by meeting you. So I want to thank you for that. And I love that we are back here together talking.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks
Thank
everyone
you both
for coming
very
today.
much. Thank you. Oh, that was wonderful. And everyone, don't leave yet, because I invite you to come over to the tables. Please buy a copy of The Unbeatable Lily Hong. Diana will be seated at the author table right here with the drape on it. Please stop by the table of the Wing Luke Museum, and then this weekend or next month or whenever, go to the museum itself. It is wonderful. There's no place like it in the world. I'm going to just talk you guys up because I love Wing Luke, and I remember when it was still in the small space. Yeah. So I'd like to thank Jordan. I'd like to thank the students who helped to organize and set up everything today. Thank you so much to Epic. Thank you very much, Diana and Karen, and the audience. Thanks for listening, asking questions. Tell your friends about the book. Tell your kids' teachers about the book too, if you have kids. Thanks so much.
Oh, one more thing. I forgot that I have a door prize to hand out. So, draw a name. Melissa. Did you, but maybe there's a different Melissa? Oh, it's a different Melissa. Melissa. Sure. And also, you already have one though. Do you mind if I? Yeah, I'm gonna actually draw another name. I'm sorry, Melissa already has a bag. I'll give you a hug though.
And also wanted to say it was Diana's birthday yesterday, so happy birthday, Diana.
Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna reach down for another one. Cat. Did I give you one? Do you? No, actually, you don't have this. Cat.